Thank you for joining us. I'm your host Molly, and for this episode I'd like to welcome Natalia Bojanic. Natalia has facilitated workshops in a wide range of settings, from charities to law firms, and has worked with companies across the different industries such as Lululemon, Amex and Cancer Care. Her teaching background is diverse, combining ancient wisdom from Tibetan Buddhism with secular mindfulness from Search Inside Yourself, a leadership institute born at Google and developed by thought leaders in emotional intelligence, mindfulness and neuroscience. Natalia is currently studying for a master's in the psychology and neuroscience of mental health at King's College London. She is also co-founder of Form Nutrition, a B Corp using business as a force for good, and a startup described by The Telegraph as a game-changing brand. Previously, she was a PR director in the luxury industry, working for brands such as LVMH and Land Rover.
Thank you so much for joining us. So to begin, if it's okay with you, I'd like to ask you some quick fire questions just so our listeners can get to know you a bit better. What was the last book that you read?
The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin, which is amazing. I've never came across a book that portrayed creativity in a such deeper but also quite accessible way. And also, if you're is likely dyslexic like myself, it's very short chapters, so it's easy for you to go along, and even after you read it you can revisit certain chapters that resonated, or things that you need to be reminded of.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation for me because I am dyslexic, and I find like the short chapters are so much more engaging for me because I don't feel like I'm going to be like stuck in the middle of this really like 30-page chapter. What was the last thing that you learned?
Last thing that I've learned. Wow, that's a big question. But I just shared what came to me in my morning meditation today. And a thought came to my mind. It wasn't a healthy thought. It wasn't a helpful thought. And then another voice came and said, "You don't have to believe that. I refuse to believe that." And I think that's something very powerful, because sometimes we use our imaginations in a not a very skillful way. So having any strategy to divert our imagination, to divert our thoughts, it can be super helpful to then not go down a rabbit hole, but remain in a state of mind that will be good for us to have the rest of our days.
And what is your greatest strength?
My greatest strength, I'm a caring person. And I think that is a strength that is very much needed in the world these days. We need
Absolutely
people who care a lot and are not ashamed of sharing how much they care.
And then linked to that, what motivates you?
What motivates me? I think seeing how much trouble is in the world and realize that I've been very lucky to have access to teachings and tools that can hopefully give clarity to people to act in a more compassionate way. So yes, that motivates me.
And the last of this kind of question until later, what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Attempt, that's actually a good question, right? So it means that in my 40s, I will still have another chance of changing my career, which
always
I've done in the past. But the thing is, I'm so happy with what I do. So
yeah, some people see it as if like, if I never got into this, I'd do something different. Some people see it like as a child, I wanted to do this, or yeah, like you said, it could be just being exactly where you are now, but starting something completely different. So I don't know how you want to approach that question.
Or it can be something that I absolutely sure I'm not going to be able to achieve, but it would be quite cool to be a rock star, right?
Yeah, exactly. It would be something cool to try. Yeah. Thank you for answering those. It's really interesting just to get to know a bit more about you personally. I do have a few more, but I'll come back to those at the end. So the theme for today's episode is Search Inside Yourself, which is a leadership institute developed by leaders in emotional intelligence, mindfulness, and neuroscience. So to begin, can you explain how mindfulness and developing emotional intelligence can lead to outstanding leadership?
Yes, that's a great question. And I would like to start answering this question by just giving a very brief definition on mindfulness, right? Because some people understand mindfulness in a different way. Some people experience mindfulness in a different way. So within the context of Search Inside Yourself, that is this leadership program, mindfulness, it's the ability to refine our awareness. Mindfulness provides us with a series of techniques to train our minds to stay in the present moment and also to be more focused. And then I'm also now going to give a brief definition on emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is the ability to understand our own emotions and the ability to understand the emotions of others. And when you combine these two key concepts, the ability to refine our awareness and attention to the ability of understanding our emotions and the emotions of others, we can then establish a really solid foundation to understand others, to manage others, to gain clarity, to make decisions, to be someone who has a level of attention that when you are presenting, when you're interacting with others, you are fully there, you are fully attentive, to be someone who is so in tune with our emotional responses that we will be able to act skillfully even when we feel triggered. We were going to be the kind of leader. And just also, it's like, a brief definition of how we see leadership not being directly connected with a job title and a job role, but by the ability to inspire, to impact, and to influence others. We all have, even if we don't have a job, even if we are talking about how we deal with our family members and our dear ones, right? And when we have that self-awareness, we are no longer acting from an autopilot. We are no longer just copy and pasting behaviors. We are no longer disconnected from our intuition. We are no longer disconnected from the things that really matter to us. And once we establish that connection, we will be able to connect with others and also bring that out of others as well.
And self-awareness is a trait which is often referred to when discussing emotional intelligence. So how can leaders improve their self-awareness, and why is it crucial for effective leadership?
So self-awareness, according to the framework of emotional intelligence, it's basically the foundational skill of emotional intelligence. Without having access and a high definition clarity on the state of our minds, the state of our emotions, our strengths and our weakness, then what chances do we have to be able to make good decisions? What chances do we have to be able to manage people in times of uncertainty? What chances do we have to show up in a balanced and emotional intelligent way? And it's pretty basic, right? And we are not necessarily trained to become more self-aware. We have people who are highly specialized, who are such experts in their fields, but they never had self-awareness training. And what I can say is, if people had self-awareness training if they were taught on how to sit with themselves and learn how to observe their mind, observe their thoughts, observe their feelings and emotions. If they had these techniques that will develop clarity, then they would not be an expert on the area that they are acting, but they will be using that expertise in a wiser and compassionate way. And just to extend on that thought, what we need right now, it's not more technology. What we need right now is not necessarily more knowledge. What we need right now is to combine all the knowledge, to combine all the technology that we already have, but bring about in a compassionate way, bring about in a way that is caring, bring about in a way that is going to benefit others.
And not everyone can be super open-minded when it comes to topics such as mindfulness. And I imagine that resistance can be one of those obstacles that gets in people's ways when learning about their inner selves. What other barriers do leaders face when trying to connect with their inner selves, and how can they overcome them?
I think the main issue around mindfulness, and previously I used to work in PR, and I think mindfulness and meditation had a really bad PR campaign because sometimes it's associated with people who are not necessarily active in the world. And a lot of leaders, they think what mindfulness is going to do is slow them down, that is just a relaxation technique, and who needs that, or even who has time for that. Mm-hmm. And that who has time for that, it doesn't, you're not going to be prioritizing. You already have this really wrong, mystical idea of what mindfulness and meditation is. And then on top of that, you're living a very busy, stressful life. So you're not going to be wanting to add another to-do thing into your day-to-day. So how do you resolve that? Part of searching inside yourself is really sharing the robust body of science that is available, that showing how beneficial these techniques are. And these techniques are universal. These techniques, they don't need to be attached to a belief system. They do not need to be attached and practiced in a religious way. Yes, let's acknowledge they do come from ancient civilizations. They have been tried and tested for over 4,000 years. But the breath, which is one of the ways of connecting with ourselves, it's available to all of us. No one has the monopoly on that. Mm-hmm. And you are not required to believe on anything else to try paying attention to your breath. And just that technique has been shown to reduce stress, reduce anxiety, reduce, the fight and flight response, mm-hmm. to switch your nervous system to the relax and restore response. And then the more you're able to use these techniques, and depending on the technique that you use, like you're training on exercising and sports, you develop different ability, you develop different skills. So just recapping, we need to have a better marketing and PR campaign for mindfulness and meditation, one that is based on the body of science that neuroscience has been sharing, how incredible it is, the ability of training the brain in a way that modifies behavior, and mindfulness that to help with that. And then people will understand how beneficial it is. Need to try. Yeah, I can tell you how delicious chocolate is, but until you go there and you have your first bite, you will never gonna understand me.
And then lastly, what advice would you give to leaders who are just beginning their journey of self-exploration or self-discovery?
Remain curious, remain open, understand that not everything that you're going to come across is going to be suitable for you. Keep questioning. And I think using your intelligent mind to investigate the things that are helpful for you, the things that actually resonate with you, is very important. So you are coming to this journey of self-exploration, self-discovery with a mind that is empowered to make your own decisions. And realize that things will change during the process. And maybe one technique that you used to find very effective might not be as effective. So maybe you need to find another technique. Maybe a teacher who you used to adore are no longer sharing the things that are useful for you. So you remain curious, you remain open, and never stop exploring.
Thank you so much for all of your stories and ideas and advice today. Just before we end, I'd like to ask a few more quick fire questions, if that's okay. Do you or have you ever played a musical instrument?
No, which is very embarrassing, right?
I don't think it's embarrassing.
I think that's one thing that I wish I had explored. But my mom used to play the piano, but music was never instilled in me for some reason. And also I cannot sing. I'm a terrible singer.
Well, it's never too late. We said that at the beginning if you want to start exploring musical instruments.
So, yeah, yes, precisely.
What is your favorite type of food?
I love Thai and Vietnamese food.
Oh. What is your favorite noise?
My favorite noise, well, I would say the sound of my breath.
Oh, lovely. Are you more of a morning person or a night owl?
I would love to be more of a morning person, but sadly I'm more of a night owl.
And lastly, if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
The ability to heal.
Oh, that's such a lovely one. Again, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed the experience.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Lovely speaking with you.
Mae un podlediad Sgwrsiau ar arweinyddiaeth ar gael trwy ein gwefan. Mae'r hawlfraint y podlediad yma yn cael ei gadw gan Llywodraeth Cymru. Our Conversations on Leadership podcast is available through our website. Copyright of this podcast is held by the Welsh Government.